You've heard the stories of the Jersey Devil, hoofprints in the snow, wings in the night, a creature that haunts the Pine Barrens for centuries. But what if I told you this legend didn't start with a curse or a birth in the woods? It started on paper, in the ink of colonial presses, where rivalries and reputations were forged one page at a time. Welcome to Unexplained History. I'm Tom McKenzie. If you enjoy the show, follow and leave a review. Also, you can sign up at unexplained.co and stay tuned for our upcoming audiobook about apocalyptic disasters. Here's how a family's name became synonymous with the devil himself through the economics of early American print. My point is simple. Myths like this can persist, born from real feuds and the force of printed pages. This connects an almanac from the 1680s to those 1909 headlines. It all begins in a bustling colonial print shop, where the smell of fresh ink hangs heavy. Step inside.
The wooden press creaks under the weight of a fresh sheet. It is 1687, in a small shop in Burlington, New Jersey. The air is thick with damp paper and drying ink. A printer's apprentice pulls the lever. The woodblock masthead stamps down, a devilish figure etched in crude lines, horns curling like question marks. This is not just any print job. It is Daniel Leeds' almanac, calculated for the latitude and meridian of Burlington itself. Outside, wind whistles along the sandy roads of the Pine Barrens. Cedar swamps stretch dark and tangled. Twigs snap underfoot and a distant owl calls. Inside, quills scratch on leather-bound ledgers. The careful carving of a masthead brands a family's identity. Daniel Leeds, a surveyor and writer, puts his mark on the colony. He publishes an almanac for the year of Christian account, 1687, tailored right to this spot on the map. Farmers and merchants flip through its pages for planting times, tide charts, and astrological notes. It is more than utility. It is a civic text, spreading news, advice, and a bit of the publisher's own views. In a young colony, this paper moves like gossip, building reputations or tearing them down. At a nearby tavern in Burlington, rough-hewn tables and the clink of tankards set the scene. A group of Quakers gathers, pages of the almanac spread out. One man, eyebrows raised, points to the masthead, that odd emblem. Leeds thinks himself a prophet, he mutters. Whispers spread. Daniel's bold claims in print rub some the wrong way, especially fellow Quakers who see heresy in his astrological bent. The conflict grows. Leeds defends his work, but the almanac becomes evidence in community disputes. Rivals seize on it and twist the imagery into accusations. Devil's work, one claims, holding up the page. In a tight-knit town, a printed slight can ruin a man's standing and push him toward the edge of society, like the swamps beyond the roads. Escalation reaches the family home, deeper in the barrens. Wind howls through pines, sand crunching under boots. Daniel's son takes up the press, but the name Leeds now carries weight, or baggage. A neighbor avoids his gaze at market. One family story tells of a young Leeds boy shunned at school, children whispering devil's kin behind his back. The human cost is clear: isolation and a legacy tainted by ink. Across the river in Philadelphia, streets hum and presses churn. Rival printers eye Leeds' success, their own almanacs competing for shelf space. Evidence in surviving volumes shows mastheads evolving, yet the devil motif lingers, a visual shorthand for controversy. Print rivalries turn personal feuds into public lore, seeding stories that outlast the men who wrote them. Back in Burlington, a heated meeting hall fills with raised voices as Quakers debate Leeds' standing. The almanac is waved like proof. See his symbols. Consequences fall on individuals. Daniel loses friends, and his family bears the stigma. Years later, those tales bend further, linking the name to darker myths. It is not just paper, it is power shaping lives across generations. Listen to the almanac itself, as if reading from brittle pages. An almanac for the year of Christian account 1687, calculated for the meridian of Burlington in West Jersey. Those words anchor it, born on paper tied to this place. The masthead, with its strange figure, becomes the first trace of a devil in the details. The path from here leads to bigger presses and fiercer rivalries, but it begins with this, a family's foothold in print, turning local spats into an enduring legend. The swamps outside seem to listen, wind-carrying echoes of snapped twigs and owl hoots, as if the barons remember.
So, there you have it. The Jersey Devil's origins are not folklore alone, but the tangible world of colonial print, where Daniel Leeds' almanac planted the seeds of a monstrous identity, rippling through reputations and rivalries for generations. That leads into a deeper look at print, place, and power in early colonial New Jersey. The Leeds family's publishing grip, almanacs as civic cornerstones, and the social pulse of Burlington. If the devil's first footprints are on paper, what did that paper look like, and who put it there? That old Leeds almanac we just pulled from the shelf is more than ink on paper. It's a spark in a powder keg of colonial reputations. Print shaped lives then, and one family's name was etched deep into the public eye through rivalries that sold like hotcakes. Early presses turned words into weapons, making images and names stick for generations. Keep that almanac masthead in mind. It will reappear in the story to come.
The leather binding creaks as you open it. The woodblock masthead stares back, bold lines carved into the page, marking the Leeds name for all to see. In colonial Burlington, this was not just a book. It was a statement, printed on a press that hummed in a small wooden shop along the Delaware River. Burlington sat as a hub in the Delaware Valley, with snow-covered rooftops huddling against the winter wind. People traded goods, news, and gossip across the water to Philadelphia, just 20 miles upstream. Printers like Daniel Leeds set up shop, their quills scratching out almanacs that predicted weather, tides, and fortunes for farmers and merchants alike. But print was not quiet. It sparked fights. Rival printers fired off pamphlets, thin stacks of paper bound in haste, sold on street corners for a penny or two. These were not polite debates. They tore into reputations and turned personal jabs into public spectacles. Take the Leeds family. Daniel's son Titan took over the almanac business in the early 1700s. His masthead carried that same woodblock flair, a visual hook readers recognized from afar. But then came the rivalry that changed everything. Shift to Philadelphia, where streets buzzed with carts and calls, a bigger pond than Burlington's quiet edges. Benjamin Franklin, young and sharp, launched his own almanac in the 1730s. To boost sales, he picked a fight with Titan Leeds, satirical jabs predicting Leeds' death in print, year after year. According to records, Franklin used this public rivalry as a sales strategy, including those satirical death prediction jokes that amplified the Leeds name in popular print culture. Pamphlets flew off the presses, each one dragging the Leeds masthead into the spotlight, making it a symbol people could not forget. A merchant in nearby Chester, snow-dusting his coat, unfolds a fresh pamphlet by the fire and chuckles at Franklin's latest dig. The Leeds name sticks, tied to that bold masthead image, now a punchline echoing through taverns and homes. This was not harmless fun. For Titan Leeds, it hit hard. His sales dipped as people grabbed Franklin's version instead, leaving Leeds to defend his family's honor in his own prints. One man's joke became another's livelihood struggle, reputations fraying like worn leather bindings. Escalate to the broader valley. Towns like Gloucester and Bristol, peripheral spots where news travelled slow but stuck deep. A farmer there might hear the tales second-hand, the Leeds name morphing in retellings, that masthead image becoming a motif passed around like currency. The implication? In these small polities, reputation was everything. Print made it permanent, turning family names into sticky visuals that outlasted the rivalries. What started as a sales tactic lingered, ready to be reread in new lights decades later.
So, we've seen how colonial print turned the Leeds name into a durable motif through rivalries and mastheads that captured eyes and minds. The consequence is clear. These tactics made images and reputations echo far beyond their time, priming them for reinterpretation. Up next, the 1909 Hoofprint incidents, mapping the wave of reports that hit hard and fast. But just how clustered were those sightings, really? January 16th, 1909. South Jersey under a hard winter, snow across the Delaware Valley, and the first tracks appear in fresh powder, defying explanation. Reports pile up, day by day, town by town. Older almanac images stayed in local memory as prints were traced across roofs and fields. The stakes are simple. If these reports cluster tightly, that clustering tells us something about what changed during that cold snap. The timeline moves from quiet starts to a growing buzz, and that build leads straight into the panic.
It is a Friday morning in Bristol, Pennsylvania, just across the Delaware River from Burlington, New Jersey. Snow fell overnight, leaving a crisp white layer. Patrolman James Sackville steps out for his rounds, carriage wheels crunching nearby. He spots the tracks first. Strange prints in the snow, like hoof prints but not from any horse he knows. They weave through backyards, up fences, even onto rooftops. Sackville follows them for miles, the prints hopping from one house to another, defying gravity. The town stirs. Newsboys are already shouting headlines from presses in Philadelphia. But this is only the beginning. By Saturday, January 17th, similar marks appear in Burlington, New Jersey, roughly 10 miles south of Bristol. Hoofprints stop the snow, crossing streets and climbing walls. One set leads to a dog's kennel. The animal cowers, barking wildly. People gather in clusters, pointing at prints that sit impossibly high on roofs. The air smells of wood smoke from chimneys, and carriage wheels leave their usual ruts. But these tracks split like a cloven hoof and are spaced erratically. Whispers spread. What could leap like that? Sunday brings more reports. Gloucester City, New Jersey, about 15 miles southwest of Burlington, records the same phenomenon. Hoofprints trail through snow, over sheds and into fields. A local farmer named Ernest checks his barn and finds marks circling his livestock pen. His cows are restless, stamping in the cold. Ernest measures the prints, about 4 inches wide, with an odd gait. He tells his neighbors, and soon the town is abuzz. For the moment it spreads by word of mouth, tension building in the frosty air. Monday, January 18th, brings the wave into Camden, 8 miles from Gloucester. Tracks show up on downtown rooftops, where newsboys hawk papers amid the clatter of streetcars. One set crosses a schoolyard, and children are sent home early as parents pull them inside. A teacher, Miss Harlan, notices prints zigzagging over fences and vanishing under porches on her way to work. She feels a chill beyond the cold, Families lock doors that night, wondering if something is prowling. Sleep is lost. Routines are disrupted. A quiet fear settles in. Tuesday pushes the pattern further. In Haddon Heights, 5 miles southeast of Camden, hoofprints mar neat backyards. They lead to a church and circle the base of the steeple before ascending, as if the prints climb. Reverend Thomas sees them on his morning walk. The prints look fresh against the white. He gathers parishioners, but no one has answers. These towns cluster within roughly a 20-mile radius, and reports begin to pile up. Press descriptions start to filter in, calling them mysterious footprints that baffle experts. Wednesday, January 20th, Woodbury, about 10 miles south, joins the list. Tracks hop over railroad lines where carriage wheels mix with train ruts in the snow. A merchant, Mr. Ellis, finds prints on his store roof, clear as day. He climbs up and measures the span, about 8 inches between steps, like a bipedal creature. News spreads faster now, telegraphs buzzing. People avoid going out after dark, and businesses close early. Daily life grinds down as neighbors become watchers. Then Thursday, January 21st, the press explodes. Philadelphia papers such as the Public Ledger run front-page stories. Mysterious hoofprints puzzle South Jersey. They trace the wave back to mid-January, listing Bristol, Burlington, Gloucester, Camden, Haddon Heights and Woodbury within a tight Delaware Valley cluster. Descriptions match. Cloven hooves in snow, on roofs spanning towns just miles apart. Newsboys shout headlines as mechanical presses churn out extras. Friday, January 22nd, more towns report sightings. Collingswood, 3 miles from Camden, sees tracks on factory roofs, and workers pause to stare up. The Philadelphia Inquirer intensifies coverage with a headline about unknown hoof marks terrorizing the region. Reporters link the wave to an alleged capture in Philadelphia, where a specimen is said to end up in a dime museum. Showmen display what they claim is the creature, drawing crowds despite the snow. Still, a pressing question remains. How did tracks cover so much ground so fast? Saturday, January 23rd, the frenzy peaks. In Salem, about 20 miles southwest, hoofprints appear on farmhouse roofs. A family, the Johnsons, discover them at dawn. Their children are too frightened to play outside. Press accounts emphasize the clustering. Sightings fall within a 50-mile arc of the Delaware. Dates pinned to that mid-January window. Schools dismiss early. Posses form with shotguns, ready for whatever left those marks. One man even twists an ankle chasing a shadow in the snow, a tangible consequence of the mounting panic. By Sunday, January 24th, reports taper, but the papers keep running the story. Coverage reconstructs the January 21st to 24th run and amplifies every detail. Entrepreneurs in Philadelphia's dime museums claim a captured beast on display and profit from the fear. The anomaly settles into a definition, a clustered wave of hoofprint and roof sightings across South Jersey and the Delaware Valley in January 1909, concentrated in that mid-January window with heavy press coverage from January 21st to 24th. The tracks fade, but the questions do not.
So, we have the map. January 16th to 24th. Hoofprints clustering across South Jersey towns. Roofs marked in snow. And the press building the buzz. The consequence was a region on edge. Daily life upended by these measurable anomalies turned widespread alarm. Now the papers, hoaxes, and competing claims begin to fan the flames, spotlighting that supposed Philadelphia capture and the showman's spectacles. A rash of hoofprints on roofs is measurable. So who amplified those measurements into a regional panic? One paper called them hoofprints from some wild animal. Another described wings and claws tearing through the night. And those contradictions did not confuse people. They fanned the flames and turned scattered reports into a sensation. Newspapers chasing sales in a cutthroat market escalated the story. If press incentives can manufacture belief, then community memory and identity can be shaped by profit as much as by experience. The economics behind the hype are central, and those key claims drove the Jersey Devil story, claims pending scrutiny. Listen close as urgency builds. Rival papers outbid each other with wilder headlines, tying hoofprints to old legends and fresh hoaxes to keep readers hooked and papers flying off the stands.
It's late January 1909, and the streets of Philadelphia buzz with energy. Carriage wheels crunch over slushy snow, kicking up grey sprays that mix with the sharp scent of coal smoke. Newsboys shout from every corner, their voices cutting through the chill. "Extra! Devil captured in Jersey, read all about it." The mechanical clatter of typeset presses echoes from nearby print shops, hammers striking lead type like gunfire, churning out editions faster than ever. Papers like the Philadelphia Record and the Evening Bulletin are locked in a battle for readers. Each tries to top the last, adding details that were not there before and linking those South Jersey hoofprints to something bigger, something that sells. One edition describes a flying beast terrorizing farms. The next claims it was spotted over the Delaware River, wings flapping wildly. It is not just reporting, it is a race to make the story irresistible. In the newsrooms, editors pore over telegrams from small-town correspondents. The air is thick with cigar smoke and the rhythmic thud of presses below. An editor slams a desk. "We need more. Tie it to that old Leeds legend. Make it pop." Competing dailies borrow from each other, embellishing to draw crowds, turning vague tracks in the snow into a creature straight out of folklore. Evidence piles up in the headlines from January 22nd to 24th. Press narratives start buzzing about a capture, not in some remote pine barrens, but right here in the city, tied to dime museums on 9th and Arch, or out in Fairmount Park. Papers report the creature has been caught and put on display, with showmen and press agents hustling to promote the spectacle. Scholarship later points to specific names, folks like Norman Jeffries, a known promoter, likely behind the buzz to pack those museums with paying customers. At the museum itself, a dimly lit hall with glass cases lines the walls, filled with oddities from around the world. In the center, a hastily built cage draws the crowd, people pressing close as coins clink into ticket boxes. Whispers spread. "Is that the devil? Look at those hooves." The effect hits families hard. A father pulling his child away and muttering about nightmares that will keep the boy awake for weeks, while the museum owners count their profits. This escalation is not random. It is driven by market forces. Newspapers need to sell ads. Museums need crowds. They amplify the tale, blending those January prints with older stories. One claim emerges. Mother Leeds cursed her 13th child in 1735, and the child transformed at birth into the Jersey Devil. It is presented as fact in some columns, but it traces back through oral histories, needing real evidence to hold up. Then there is the other claim. The January 1909 Jersey Devil capture was a staged hoax, orchestrated by press agents and dime museum owners to sell tickets and publicity. Papers ran with it, but later digs show how agents planted stories, faking exhibits to cash in. The human cost appears in a local merchant's plight, his shop emptying as folks flock to the museums instead, leaving him scraping by on thin sales and wondering if the hype will ever die down. Back on the streets, the tension peaks. Newsboys dodge carriages, hollering updates that grow wilder by the hour. A mother clutches her shopping, eyes wide at the headlines, deciding to keep her children indoors, fear spreading like ink on fresh paper. When papers compete this way, they do more than report events. They shape what people believe, turning curiosity into community-wide panic. By the end of that week, the hoofprint reports have ballooned into national news, circulated far beyond Jersey. But these claims, the cursed birth and the staged capture, sit as narratives waiting for scrutiny. They show how economics can twist facts, leaving folks like that frightened mother or the struggling merchant to deal with the fallout, their daily lives upended by stories spun for profit.
So we've seen how newspaper rivalries and museum hustles turned Hoofprints into a sensation, with claims of curses and captures driving the narrative, all fueled by the chase for dollars and shaping what communities remembered and feared. Now the paper trail points to the figures who made the story, the Leeds family legacy, key press players from the 18th to 20th centuries, and the dime museum showmen who turned words into spectacle. The record includes Titan Leeds masthead imagery, and scholarship has named promoters tied to the hype. Which personalities turned copy into commerce? Those showmen and press agents we just heard about aren't outliers. They're part of a chain stretching back centuries. We look at who they were: the Leeds family printers, Franklin the rival, and the 1909 promoters. Their motives and reach explain why the story stuck and point to the records needed to separate fact from fiction. That brings us closer to testing those claims and shows how grudges and quick profits can twist history into something unrecognizable.
You're in the pine barrens late at night. Wind whistles through the cedar swamps, a twig snaps in the dark. An owl hoots far off, breaking the quiet. Someone ahead whispers they've seen it. A shadowy figure with wings, said to be born from a curse on the Leeds family. Who started that whisper? We trace it back through the eyes of those who lived it. Daniel Leeds was a Quaker surveyor in colonial New Jersey around 1680. He arrived from England, set up in Burlington, and began printing almanacs. He was opinionated and clashed with fellow Quakers over astrology and politics. They censured him and called his work devilish. Daniel fought back, publishing pamphlets that mocked his critics. His motive was to defend his reputation and sell more books. He had the means, a printing press, rare in the colonies, giving him direct access to readers. His son, Titan Leeds, took over the family business by 1707. Titan kept the almanacs going but added flair. Scholars note his masthead featured wyvern-like imagery, a winged dragonish creature that echoes later descriptions of the Jersey Devil. Was it just decoration or something more? Titan's role deepened the family feud. Rivals targeted him, spreading rumors that painted the Leeds as cursed or monstrous. He had the same printing legacy, able to counterattack in print while amplifying the backlash. Now the scene changes. You're in a bustling Philadelphia print shop, ink thick in the air and presses clacking. Benjamin Franklin, young and ambitious, launched his own almanac in 1733 under the Poor Richard name. He saw Titan Leeds as competition and used satire to undercut him. Franklin predicted Titan's death in a fake prophecy, then confirmed it the next year, mocking Titan as a ghost. The motive is clear: boost sales by ridiculing a rival. Franklin's means were his growing network of printers and newspapers, turning a personal jab into widespread lore. This was no abstract feud. Titan Leeds reading Franklin's words would have felt like a direct attack. Family name dragged through the mud, business threatened, all for someone else's gain. Pamphlets circulated between colonies, embedding the idea of a Leeds devil in public memory, even if it began as a metaphor. Fast forward to the early 20th century. The environment escalates. You stand in a dimly lit museum hall, staring at a glass case or iron cage meant to hold spectacles. Wind outside might mimic the Baron's owls, but inside it's all showbiz. Scholarship points to figures like Norman Jeffries, a press agent for Philadelphia's dime museums, and others in the circus world. They promoted oddities to draw crowds, using newspapers as their megaphone. Jeffries, for one, had ties to the Ninth and Arch Museum, known for exotic exhibits. His motive was pure profit. Sensational stories sold tickets. His means were deep connections to reporters and editors, planting stories that blurred fact and fiction. Scholars also named showmen linked to traveling carnivals, who staged captures with props and actors, feeding the press cycle we examined before. Here's where it hits home again. A local farmer in the Barrens might hear owl calls and twig snaps at night, then read in the paper about a devil sighting nearby. Panic sets in. He bolts his doors, warns his kids, maybe even grabs a gun. The consequence is real fear disrupting lives, traced back to promoters' schemes for a quick buck. Connecting these threads, a pattern appears. Daniel and Titan Leeds supply the family name and early imagery. Franklin amplified it through media rivalry. The 1909 showman revived it for spectacle. Each actor had motives tied to survival: reputation, sales, crowds, and private disputes morphed into public myths, escalating from print shop jabs to widespread hysteria. Which of these figures left paper we can test, and which survive only in oral retelling? The Leeds almanacs and Franklin's writings are tangible and archived. The showman's trails are often word of mouth or faded clippings. That distinction matters as investigation moves to places like the New Jersey State Archives for land deeds, probate records, and church minutes, documents that could prove or disprove family curses or staged events. What would count as a smoking gun? A signed contract for a hoax, or a diary entry debunking a claim?
We've profiled the key players, the Leeds printers defending their turf, Franklin weaponizing wit for market share, and those 1909 showmen chasing spectacle dollars, each adding layers to the legend with access to print and promotion. Now comes the evidence toolbox. Hit archives like the New Jersey State Archives to cross-check records. If the smoking gun isn't there, does the story evaporate or simply hide deeper? Now we shift from who to how. What makes or breaks a legend is proof, or the lack of it. Here comes the toolbox for chasing the truth, where claims meet the cold light of records, and not everything survives scrutiny.
The New Jersey State Archives holds colonial records and guides useful for researching the Leeds family and proprietary era documents. That's F08 for those tracking. Begin in the reading room in Trenton, the air thick with old paper and polished wood. A researcher fills a request form and orders land deeds from the 1700s tied to the Leeds name. If the devil's birth story rests on family curses or property disputes, those deeds could show real feuds or nothing at all. Check probate records next. Wills and estate inventories show what someone left behind. For Titan Leeds or his descendants, scan for unusual inheritances and hints of family lore. No wild speculations, just cross-check dates and names against the legend's timeline. One mismatch in a death date can collapse a key claim. It's methodical. Flip microfilm, note faded ink. Feel the weight of centuries in each page turn. That's how a foundation gets built. Turn to church minutes. Local parishes in the Pine Barrens kept logs of baptisms, marriages, and disciplinary actions. Request those records and focus on the Leeds line. Is there a recorded birth anomaly in 1735, or just ordinary entries? An absence of devilish notation suggests the story grew later, maybe embroidered for effect. At a long table, a historian's glasses slip as notes are jotted. One overlooked entry can rewrite the narrative, turning folklore into a footnote. Move on to police blotters from the 1800s onward. State repositories hold some digitized files, but raw reports often live at county courthouses. Look for sighting reports, livestock killings blamed on a winged beast, or trespass complaints near alleged lairs. Triangulate with state holdings. Compare a Burlington County report with entries in Trenton. If clusters appear during economic slumps, that hints at motive. A blank blotter is evidence too. Panic without proof. For the 1909 flap, check museum ledgers. Private collections and historical societies may hold financial records from dying museums. Request attendance logs, ticket stubs, and promotional expenses. Verify whether revenue spikes align with devil-hunting spectacles. It's not assuming guilt, it's testing if profits drove the hype. A curator might hand over brittle ledgers. The faded numbers can tell a story of desperation. One inflated entry shows how spectacle could twist facts for a family's survival during hard times. Press provenance demands its own method. The New Jersey State Library offers a digitized newspaper index and directory used to locate 1909-era coverage across state titles. Begin with bylines. Who wrote the piece? A local stringer or a city desk fabulist? Check circulation footprints. Did the story jump from small-town rags to Philadelphia dailies? Watch for sensational language like terror in the pines, without sources. Triangulate. If one paper reports a capture, but others ignore it, that's a red flag. On the streets in 1909, mechanical typeset presses clank, newsboys shout headlines about devil sightings, and carriage wheels crunch on snow as editions fly off stands. A researcher pores over microfilm. The machine hums while inconsistencies surface, like a witness quoted in one paper but absent elsewhere. That gap implies fabrication, perhaps to boost sales during a slow news week. For a farmer back then, exaggerated tales meant real fear, tighter barns and sleepless nights. One family's night could be ruined by ink and opportunism. Forensic methods tie it together. Use watermark analysis on old prints to date documents. Does a purported 1700s broadsheet match error paper? Cross-reference state repositories for authenticity. Check financial motives by auditing museum ledgers against tax records. Unexplained windfalls could point to staged events. Escalate from quiet archive rooms to labs, where UV light reveals alterations. A forged clipping can disprove a sighting, easing modern minds but exposing historical actors. Maybe a press agent's livelihood ruined, or a community's trust eroded by doubt. The human toll shows in the details. Take a 1909 mill worker scanning papers amid the press din. Convinced a beast roams nearby. He skips shifts, loses pay, his family goes hungry, all from unchecked claims. Or a Leeds descendant today, combing archives for clarity, finds only voids that sting like rejection. These are lives altered by what's verified or debunked. The process demands care, because one document can heal or haunt. One operational question lingers. What single document would convert a disputed claim into verified history? A signed affidavit from a 1909 witness, perhaps? Or a colonial diary entry matching the legend beat for beat? That's the hunt, methodical, tense, and revealing layers we might not expect.
We've mapped sources from the New Jersey State Archives to local blotters and museum ledgers, and reviewed ways to dissect press trails and financials. Claims don't stand alone. They need hard evidence, and without it, the devil's story starts to fracture under its own weight. Flip the lens. The rabbit hole, the strongest proponent case, focuses on believer accounts, detailed witness narratives, and press montages as they see them. It includes the 1859 printed retelling In the Pines as F04, plus contemporaneous testimonies presented as straight claims. Could one compelling story tip the scales? You have the tools now, the places to dig into old papers and records that could crack this wide open. Before any tests, step into the shoes of those who bought the story. Hook, line, and sinker. The believers get their full say. The case that made entire towns lock their doors at night.
Snow falls heavy on the rooftops of Bristol, Pennsylvania, January 1909. The Delaware Valley towns huddle under a blanket of white, streetlights casting long shadows over the frozen ground. A mill worker steps out for his shift, boots crunching, and stops dead. There, cutting across his yard, a line of hoofprints in the snow, cloven like a deer's, but walking on two legs, straight as if something strode with purpose. He follows them, heart pounding, over fences, up walls, even across a rooftop or two, before they vanish into the woods. That same night, in nearby Burlington, New Jersey, a woman hears it, a piercing scream echoing from the pines. Not quite animal, not quite human, shaking the windows of her home on the edge of town. Word spreads fast. By morning, the papers are full of it. Here's how the Trenton Times put it on January 18th. A strange creature, described as having wings like a bat and a head like a horse, was seen flying over Woodbury last night, leaving tracks that baffled the locals. Claims like this pile up, from Camden to Gloucester City, each one adding to the frenzy. Shift to Haddonfield, where a posse forms. Men grab shotguns and lanterns, trudging through the snow-swept streets, following those eerie hoofprints that hop over obstacles no normal beast could manage. One farmer swears he saw it perched on his barn, eyes glowing in the dark, before it leaped away with a flap of leathery wings. The evidence mounts in these retellings. Tracks everywhere, measured and sketched, 8 inches long, 3 inches wide, spaced like a bipedal stride. In Philadelphia, a trolley car operator claims the thing attacked his vehicle, banging on the roof until he sped off, leaving scratches in the paint. This isn't just random talk. It ties back to older stories, like the one from In the Pines in May 1859, an early, widely cited printed retelling of the Leeds devil tradition. It describes a cursed birth in the 1700s, a 13th child transformed into a devilish beast that haunts the region, flying off into the barrens. Believers connect the dots. Those tales from 1859 match the sightings of 1909. The wings, the hooves, the screams. It's not coincidence, they say. It's the same entity resurfacing. In towns like Moorestown, families bar their doors, children too scared to sleep, as reports flood in from all over the Delaware Valley. Escalation hits Philadelphia's edges, where the urban sprawl meets snowy fields. A police officer in Blackwood fires at a shadow with horns and a tail, watching it bound away unharmed. The implication sinks in. If bullets don't stop it, what will? Communities rally, forming search parties that comb the woods, finding more prints, more signs of something unnatural. Human toll shows in the quiet moments. Take Daniel, a factory hand in Camden. He misses work after spotting the creature outside his window, too shaken to leave home, his family gathering around the stove, whispering prayers as snow piles up on the rooftops. Or Sarah, a schoolteacher in Trenton, who cancels classes when kids refuse to walk the streets, terrified of the hoofprints leading right to the schoolyard. The narrative builds to a fever pitch. Press montages quote witnesses. It had a kangaroo body and emitted blood-curdling yells from the Philadelphia Record. These stories weave together, creating a tapestry so consistent, so widespread, it's hard to dismiss. If you believe the accounts as a contemporary resident, what evidence would have felt persuasive enough to close the case? Those tracks in the snow, defying logic, matched by screams that chilled the bone. That might have done it, sealing the belief that something real, something ancient, was out there.
There you have the believer's strongest pitch. A whirlwind of sightings, tracks, and old tales that gripped the Delaware Valley and made the impossible feel real to those living through it. Hold on. Skeptics take the stage, applying hard tests and counter-evidence to see whether motive and mechanics can unravel it all. Can forensic checks on those clippings and ledgers finally put this to bed? We're back in that frozen January of 1909. Stories landed like a blizzard, piling up unchallenged. Believers built their case, layer by layer, from dramatic press clips to the sensory chaos of screams in the night. What if we pull those threads, test them against the archives, and see which ones snap? This is where belief meets the cold light of evidence. We're tracing the paper trail of those headlines, checking for planted stories, and weighing claimed captures against real-world logic. Some pieces hold, others crumble. If the core falls apart under scrutiny, we are left asking why the tale endures.
It is mid-January of 1909, and presses are churning in Philadelphia. Mechanical typeset machines clank as they ink plates with fresh headlines about strange tracks and eerie howls. Newsboys bundle papers, their shouts echoing down snowy streets, while carriages crunch over ice, wheels leaving rutted paths that could almost pass for something unnatural. Fast forward to 2019. A team at the Philadelphia Inquirer dug into those old archives and reframed the January flap as a proto-viral hoax ecology. Stories spreading like wildfire before the internet and feeding off each other. They named Norman Jeffries as a prime suspect. Jeffries, a publicist tied to a local museum, allegedly planted tales to drum up crowds for a spectacle, turning fear into foot traffic. Consider the chain. One paper runs a wild account of hoofprints leaping fences, then another picks it up and embellishes details. The Inquirer found patterns of copied text and phrases repeating across editions, more suggestive of coordinated releases than chaotic eyewitness reports. Jeffries had the connections, press contacts, and a knack for promotion. If he was planting these items, the flap looks less like organic panic and more like engineered buzz. Now shift to the museum angle. Claims of captures appear in those stories, a creature trapped or displayed under glass and drawing gawkers. What would real evidence look like? We would expect shipping manifests for exotic animals, vet reports on sedation, or ticket ledgers that spike with an exhibit. Motive on paper might show budget shortfalls, with curators noting a novel attraction needed in internal memos. Absence here does not prove fakery, but it does raise questions about where the trail is if this was legit. Take one human side. A museum worker in 1909, maybe a young attendant like Elias, told to guard a dim-lit room. He stands by a glass case, the air thick with dust and anticipation, as families press close, whispering about the devil inside. Elias knows it may be a stuffed oddity or a clever fake, and his job depends on the illusion. One slip and the crowd turns skeptical, his livelihood gone. These spectacles thrive on belief, while the people behind them carry the weight of deception every day. Escalating out to the Pine Barrens, those January nights were not just about mystery. Tracks in the snow looked hoof-like and seemed to jump impossible distances. Consider natural culprits. A large bird, like a heron, its feet pressing odd shapes in fresh powder, then melting edges from a daytime thaw that make them look stretched or leapt. Or foxes, their paws compact and splayed in soft snow, with wind-erasing connections between prints. Screams piercing the dark can come from ordinary sources. Bobcats yowl with a human-like wail, especially during winter mating season. And sound can echo through the pines. Ice effects matter too. Frozen streams cracking under pressure can sound like unearthly shrieks. A farmer checking his traps hears that cry, bolts home, heart-pounding and convinced of something supernatural. His story spreads at the local store, growing with each retelling and turning a natural noise into a monster's call. Another consequence hits a family in a small barrens town. Parents keep children indoors after dark, fearing the tracks outside their window. The mother, exhausted from worry, snaps at her husband over dinner, and the tension fractures their routine. It is not just fear. Doubt creeps in when explanations emerge, and they are left questioning what they saw and rebuilding trust in the ordinary world. Pull these threads together and the believer claims face tests. The press chain shows signs of manipulation, museum trails lack substance, and tracks plus screams match everyday wildlife or weather. What passes is the raw emotion of those nights and the way fear gripped communities. What fails is the idea of an untouchable supernatural force, when evidence points to human hands and natural tricks. Repetition kept the tale alive, not proof.
So, there it is, the believer case tested, with planted stories and natural explanations stripping away the mystery layer by layer. The core does not hold as supernatural fact, but as a web of hype and echo, leaving real people caught in the fallout of doubt and division. Yet somehow, this contested tale worms its way into official culture, becoming a brand that shapes teams, exhibits, and tourism. How does a story like this go from questioned hoax to civic pride, and which elements survive skeptical testing because they were repeated? Institutional buy-in can eclipse early doubts and make a shaky story feel permanent. We've seen how those 1909 stories got picked apart, doubts that stuck around even as the tale spread. Institutional support can drown out those questions, turning a fragile narrative into something that feels permanent. Here, the Jersey Devil leaps from newspaper scraps into New Jersey's identity, through sports teams, museum halls, and tourist spots, while holes in the record still demand answers. It's about legacy, how a contested history gets branded and celebrated even when the evidence wavers, and it raises a sharp question. If a public narrative can be manufactured on a press, who decides whether it becomes part of a place's identity?
Hold this faded hockey jersey. The red fabric worn at the edges, the black devil silhouette stitched across the chest, horns curling like question marks. It's from the early 80s, when a team relocated and picked a name that tied straight into local lore. This isn't just merchandise, it's a symbol of how a story, once doubted, embeds itself in everyday life. Shift to the Pine Barrens, where cedar swamps stretch under a grey sky. Wind moves through the branches, a twig snaps underfoot, and a distant owl calls into the fading light. On these sandy roads and tangled paths, the Jersey Devil is no longer only a paper tale. It's a draw for hikers and ghost hunters, pulled by maps marked for devil sightings. Local guides lead tours and point out spots where tracks supposedly appeared, turning skepticism into weekend adventures. Evidence builds in unexpected places. Take the New Jersey Devils NHL franchise. They adopted the Devil's name after relocating to New Jersey in 1982. Chosen in a fan poll, it put a figure from disputed headlines on scoreboards and in chants, turning the Devil into a mascot of state pride. Branding implies something deeper. Communities latch onto these stories even when archives show cracks. Move to the Delaware Valley towns, with snow-covered rooftops glinting under streetlights, a stark contrast to the wild periphery beyond. In places like Camden or Trenton, you'll find devil-themed festivals and roadside signs, a blend of urban life in the Barren's Edge. It isn't about believing every claim. It's about owning the narrative as part of who you are. Now, consider the academic side. In 2021, Rutgers University Libraries assembled the 1909 paper trail, pulling together clippings and letters that trace the frenzy's spread. Curators laid it out like a puzzle, showing how press hype built the myth while also highlighting gaps, missing links in the chain that leave room for doubt. Scholarly work adds another layer, treating sightings as episodic clusters, waves of reports that spike and fade over decades. These syntheses point to patterns, a flap in the 1800s, another in the 1950s, each building on the last. Yet they flag unresolved gaps, like vague eyewitness accounts that don't align, and origin stories with no primary sources to back them up. Human consequences arrive quietly. Think of a local historian in a small baron's town, sifting through family albums for any scrap tied to the devil. He's not chasing monsters, he's preserving a sense of place, but the lack of closure weighs on him. "We've got the stories," he says, "but where's the thread that ties it all together?" His word keeps the tale alive, and yet it frustrates as tourism booms while real history slips away. A young curator at a regional museum sets up a devil exhibit with plaster casts of tracks and yellowed news clips. Visitors flock, kids wide-eyed, but she knows the display skirts the evidentiary holes. No definitive proof, just echoes of old hype. It boosts attendance, yes, but it leaves her wondering whether they're celebrating folklore or filling gaps with wishful thinking. The implication spreads wider. When institutions adopt these narratives, they shape civic identity. Sports branding makes the devil a rallying cry. Museums curate it as heritage, and tourism sells it as adventure. Yet archival gaps persist. Unanswered questions about origins, inconsistent sightings, and why clusters happen when they do. Communities retell these histories, not despite the doubts, but because the story fills a need for mystery in a mapped-out world. Back in the Barrens, the wind picks up and an owl hoots again. The pull is clear, the story endures, branded and exhibited, even as proof remains elusive. It's a legacy built on sand, yet it stands, inviting us to question what makes a myth stick.
So, we've tracked how the Jersey Devil evolved from shaky press tales into branded symbols of New Jersey pride, hockey teams, exhibits, and tours that outlast the original doubts, leaving gaps that echo through cultural memory. Finally, we close by circling back to manufactured narratives and what lingers in community lore, with fresh looks at unresolved gaps and ways listeners can dig deeper. What would definitive proof look like today? We've just seen how the Jersey Devil seeps into sports teams and museum displays, turning whispers into icons. And yet, the archives still leave us without proof.
You stand in a quiet museum hall, staring at a glass case that holds faded newspaper clippings from 1909. Light catches the yellowed edges. You can almost smell the old ink. Rutgers University Libraries assembled this exhibit in 2021, bringing together primary sources, articles, and artifacts that map the Jersey Devil flap like a record of panic. As you lean in, you notice what's missing: the solid link that ties it all to something real beyond the hype. Think of those hoofprints in the snow, the ones that sparked it all back then. People woke to strange marks trailing across yards, over rooftops, then vanishing into the woods. Families gathered, pointing and whispering, breath fogging the cold air. Was it a beast? A hoax? The evidence melted away with the thaw, leaving only stories. That's the heart of it. Episodic bursts of fears spreading through papers, and word of mouth, not a straight chain of facts. On the believer's side, logic feels personal. A sighting here, a strange noise there, a case built from gut feeling and shared tales. It's powerful in the moment, like huddling around a fire and swapping stories that make the night feel alive. Apply skeptical tests, cross-check dates, hunt for original documents, and cracks appear. What seems solid becomes echoes and exaggeration, contagion moving from town to town. Shift to a university archive room. Shelves line the walls, boxes labeled with neat handwriting. A researcher pulls out files, dust motes dancing in the lamp beam. They are chasing unresolved items, missing eyewitness logs from the earliest flaps, untraced sources behind the 1909 surge. Scholars still piece these together to see what a tested account really gives us. Not a monster in the flesh, but a mirror of how societies brand their fears. Human consequences appear close to home. A local historian in the Pine Barrens spends weekends in attics and finds a family's diary. Its entries record neighbors shunning each other over devil rumors. It split communities and turned friends suspicious. Real fallout from ink on a page. Or consider a museum curator deciding what goes in that glass case. Her choices shape how children learn the story, blending fact and folklore, and steering how a region sees itself. At a modern exhibit opening, crowds mill around casts of hoofprints preserved under glass. The air hums with chatter, some laugh it off, others nod seriously. The implication settles in. This is not just history, it's identity. Institutions like the New Jersey Devils adopted as mascot, turning myth into symbol, while archives remind us of the holes. It's a balance, honoring the resonance that keeps the tale alive without pretending everything is proven. We've tested believer logic against the evidence, and this emerges. A story of social branding over empirical certainty. Unresolved items remain, those elusive original tracks, private collections scholars still hunt for. It asks a simple question: how do we weigh what sits in the glass case against what is absent from the record? In a quiet moment, staring at hoofprints recreated in plaster, you feel the central tension. If contagion and culture build the beast, does that make it any less real in the ways that matter? What counts as proof when public perception and the media both shape the narrative?
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the Jersey Devil's tangled history. Stories like these show how myths shape our world. If you enjoyed it, follow Unexplained History and drop a rating or review. It helps us keep uncovering these tales. Visit unexplained.co.newsletter for more. To follow the traces yourself, check Rutgers' online exhibit archives or take a local Pine Barrens tour to chase those unresolved threads. If a monster can be churned out like a product, who gets to decide its reality? The media or the people? In our next episode, we'll dive into the eerie world of skinwalkers, shapeshifters of Navajo legend, and modern encounters.